Well, hello there. How we doing? I hope well. I'm Bruce Williams. Welcome, my friends. Welcome to my world. We talk a little bit about you, your life, your hopes, your ambitions, and from time to time, just from time to time, maybe we can take a little bit about a dream or two along the way. Now, to get this whole thing together for you and I to speak, pick up a telephone. We got 6 more hours together, and I hope I'll talk to many of you at 877-287-4964. 877-287-4964. If there's something happening in your life, on your mind, whatever it is, I'd like to share it with you. But that's entirely up to you. You got to make it happen. I mean, I can't do that. The telephone, 877-287-4964. If you prefer, ask Bruce at brucewilliams.com. I thank you very much for your emails, and you are I've been very pleased for each one I get. Don't stop now. I have to share one with you. It's brief. And I know that the intent of the sender was a little different, but it's only a line. It says, "Glad you're leaving the airways. Wish you were taking your last lying breath, along with Beck and Limbaugh, etc." I'm telling you, I broke up when I got this thing. He didn't play on words. Your last lying breath. Sugar Bad is there. I don't know if I'm going to. What should I give out his email address? I mean, he sent it to me I'd be curious. Do you want to know who Sugar Bad is? Well, let me know. Our telephone number one more time, Sugar Bad, 877-287-4964. And if you are listening, Mr. Sugar Bad or Ms. Sugar Bad, give me a call, and I can certainly know who you are by giving me a couple of digits from your email address, which as yet I have not given out. We're going to South Carolina, Aiken, South Carolina. Hello there.
How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing just fine, thank you.
I'm so glad to finally talk to you. I've been listening to you, and I sound like so many people have called you, but for over 20 years, and I've never called, and at least I'm getting you right at the very end.
Well, I'm glad you're here. What's on your mind?
A couple of things. One of the first things I want to say, there's some little concepts that you've put out there over the years, and I'm always looking for my rat box. I want you to know that.
You keep looking, and one day you may find it. That's another thing that belongs on my list of stuff, the rat boxes. I'd quite forgotten that. Go ahead.
That's so important. That, and also I remember it's 2 decades ago when you were driving in that whole idea of being successful in a business and whatever it is that you do, that you need to be able to walk away from it, because if you felt like you were so important that you had to be there every day, that you were not being successful. And again, I try to live up to that every day when I go to work. I want to get that thing going so that it keeps making money and keeps doing business for everybody.
There you go. Well, that's appreciated, my friend. I've enjoyed doing this for all this time. I figured it out in hours, and it's an impressive number. And we're going to see. We're going to see. It'll be interesting how, for me, next week goes. I thank you again for your call. 877-287-4964. 877-287-4964. Or if you prefer, ask Bruce at brucewilliams.com. I'm sure that must have wound up someplace in one of the books or papers, but the rat box thing has served me well, enormously well. I know others who have been equally well served, and I'm still looking, and maybe now even perhaps after I leave this enterprise, I'm going to be looking for some kind of another business of some sort, and maybe a rat box. And you say, what the hell is a rat box? Let me tell you. A long time ago, my uncle owned a piece of, he didn't know the whole thing. I guess whether he was senior or not, but he ran a joint, a lumber yard. And it was not only pretty, it was a very successful operation. It had a siding for railroad cars that come in loaded with lumber. And then they had guys working for them who unloaded the cars and put the wood in racks. And of course, in those days, they did things a little differently. And they didn't allow green lumber to be used. When it came in, it was looked at, and if it was not properly aged, it would go into another part of the lumber yard and sit there for a year or two until it had dried out appropriately. But in any event, there was always time, as there are in most endeavors, when there was not a whole lot to do. It might have been 10 minutes here, 5 minutes there, and whatever. Well, there was a company adjacent, or not, well, close enough, Hoffman LaRoche, which is a huge pharmaceutical company, close by. And they did some kind of experiments with rats. You know, they put them in cages, and they did thus and such. I have no idea what they were doing with it. It was just not relevant. But they put them in wooden cages. You would think that they could eat their way out, but I guess they didn't stay in there that long. But a cage was never used a second time. Now, how they destroyed them or whatever, I have no way of remembering, and I doubt if there's anybody alive who would know. But there was a constant need for these rat boxes. And from time to time, I guess they would put the whole thing up to bid. They were metal screening, a little door and a catch and whatever. It wasn't a very complicated proposition. But they bought thousands of these rat boxes. My Uncle George never lost a bid. Never. He wasn't fixing anything or doing some of the stuff that I did when I was involved in bidding on things, perfectly above board. But he never lost a bid. Now, how can that be? Well, you see, he had no labor costs with the rat boxes. None. Now, how did he accomplish that? Well, he had all of the materials in one area of his lumber yard for rat boxes. And any time a laborer like me was not doing something constructive, you know, there was, let's say a boxcar came in and it was being turned around on this turnstile, it might take 10, 12 minutes. You weren't sitting around having a cigarette. Go on down and make rat boxes. So as a consequence, he really had no labor directly involved because the rat boxes were all made on time that otherwise would have been completely wasted. Well, let me tell you, that wasn't lost on me as a kid. And all my life, I've looked for rat boxes. In other words, what can I do in our businesses with people who are working with us to have them doing something rather than nothing? 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there. Well, in the flower business, one of the things that we have learned to do is tie ribbons. Now, that sounds crazy, but when the ladies working for us don't have anything to do, they're tying Christmas ribbons in January. And we figured out ways, it's not relevant, how to store them so they're perfectly good 11 months later. But when we need several thousand, I don't know how many we use. Certainly we must use 10 to 15,000 of these things or more. But every one of them got made on time. Well, most of them, maybe if we got ran short. But you know where I'm going with this. Our rat box is those ribbons. Because they're being made in time that otherwise the ladies will be sitting around talking. 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there. And there have been some other instances, which I don't have to get into just now in my life, where I found other rat boxes, ways to make time that otherwise would have been completely wasted. Made it productive and made it almost impossible for competition to meet and do what I'm doing at the price I'm doing it because of the way that we did those things. I'd suggest that you look for your rat box in your life. Could make the difference between being an average life and, as my uncle was, very wealthy. And the rat boxes were what did it. We go to Oshkosh. Hello there. Welcome.
Hello, Bruce.
Good evening.
I think that you have given kind, accurate, prompt information over the years, and I think you've taken people who call with somewhat very complex questions, and you've offered them solutions and advice. So I completely disagree with the gentleman who emailed you, if you would like to call him a gentleman.
That was funny, don't you think?
He represents probably an unemployed Democrat.
Well, I don't know.
Well, I think he does. He's an angry, unemployed Democrat who's watched his party and the other political party outsource all the jobs the past 20 years, and if you make any conservative comments, he's angry. Bruce, you gave it your best. You've given millions of people good, accurate, free advice. I listened to you do it. You should be proud of yourself.
You're very generous. I thank you so very, very much, my friend. To be continued. I'm Bruce Williams. 877-287-4964 to Alexandria, VA. Hello there.
Hi, Bruce. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
I'm delighted you've gotten here before it ended.
Indeed. Well, let me say that you know me better as the guy who picked that music you've been using as a theme song for, 15 years. I know how much you like it.
This couldn't be KD.
Indeed. How are you, sir?
I am very well, thank you, Guy. It was nice of you to call, and I will be seeing you in 2 weeks and 2 days on the cruise.
We'll be seeing each other soon.
Yes.
Well, listen, I don't have a problem with my neighbor or the car dealership or the bank, nor do I have a business I want to sell, but for the many thousands of people who do or have done, I want to salute you for all your sage advice and your counsel over the years. You've been a friend and a mentor to millions of listeners for a long, long time.
You're very generous, my friend. I really appreciate it, because I know this is a guy with an extensive radio background, very extensive, with a big company. And it was always a pleasure working with him, and now as a friend.
Well, I won't say how long we go back, Bruce, because that would certainly make us both sound pretty old. But suffice it to say, I was working for a competing radio network, but what you probably don't know is I was a fan and a listener long before our worlds came together. I used to listen to your show every night on the way home, and believe you me, many a time I got home, I pulled into my driveway, and I just couldn't shut the radio off. I couldn't turn the car off. I had to listen to how this endeavor would play out, often waiting through the commercial break just to see what you'd say when you came back.
That's a high compliment, as you should know. You do know, because you're in the business, and I appreciate it. I do wish you well, my friend. I have a story here, and this guy is a super guy, but if you're going on the cruise, you will get to meet him in 2 weeks. The government did something right. Of course, a lot of you people may say it was wrong, but in my opinion, the Senate has rejected, and I think President Obama, in a foolish moment, wanted to give $250 to everybody on Social Security, veterans, people with disabilities and whatever, because there was no cost of living increase in Social Security this year, because inflation is just about nil. And of course, the seniors' lobbies are not happy. President Obama has called for Congress to approve the payments to make up for not increasing Social Security, but the Senate killed it 50-47. The payments would have added $13 billion to a $108 billion job creation package pending in the Senate. The Congress approved payments last year as part of the stimulus package. Remember, everybody on Social Security and these other groups got a $2,500, effectively a bonus. Well, finally somebody has said, where in heaven's name is the money coming from? Social Security payments for the elderly disabled will be flat for the first time in, what would it be, 35 years, because they're tied to the consumer index, which decreased during the recession. That follows a year in which payments rose by almost 6% because of a spike in gasoline prices. So do you want their gas to go up so they can get this raise? I don't think so. Bernie Sanders, who's an independent, says it's wrong to turn our backs on seniors in this moment of economic difficulty. But Republican Senator Judge Gregg pointed out that the bill would defeat the purpose of indexing Social Security payments to inflation. And he's absolutely right. If you're going to have a place for it to go up, if inflation sets in, why would you get it if it doesn't? And nobody's saying they ought to go down. The law says, as Senator Gregg points out, it shouldn't be given. At least 10 Democrats agreed with Gregg and joined 40 Republicans to defeat the proposal. What about those other round numbers, 50 Democrats? What the hell were they thinking about? You see, you got people in Washington who they can give you all this pay-as-you-go routine, and we don't want to spend money, and we're going to get the budget in line. They don't have a clue. When something comes up and it looks like it's going to be popular and help them get reelected, you can bet your life and your children's lives they'll vote for it. And where's the money coming from? They don't know. I'm not going to tell you they don't care, although their actions shout their words. The idea that President Obama said we're going to have a pay-go thing. In other words, if you can't show where the money's coming from, you don't put the legislation into effect. Well, you know how long that lasted? And the president was going to sign this bill. What an incredible joke. If you'd like to join us, 877-287-4964. If you prefer, ask Bruce at brucewilliams.com. Ypsilanti, Michigan. Thank you for your patience. What's up?
Hi, Bruce. Thank you very much for taking my call.
You bet.
I want to thank you for all the advice you've given to myself and to others throughout the years. I do have two questions to ask you, and then I'd like to take you to task on a certain issue as well.
Well, take me to task first. That's the part.
It's just,
let me have some fun.
Just a short one. I do like hot dogs with ketchup, sir.
Oh, you're un-American. Hot dogs and ketchup. Look, you don't get it. Ketchup goes on hamburgers.
Yeah,
ketchup goes on pork roll. And also, but ketchup does not go on hot dogs. My good friend, my wife's father, is completely un-American in that regard, and we're going on a cruise together in a couple of weeks, and I got to hide the ketchup bottle because we both like hot dogs. Go ahead. Anyway, I'll even tolerate your question now, but barely.
Okay, I have two questions, actually. Many years ago, our local station dropped you, and there was an issue with Target and the Salvation Army, and I'm just wondering if if anything has changed with that issue, if you're still electing to vote with your feet with Target. Or...
I still do, and I know that a lot of people disagree. Target took the position that the Salvation Army, unlike Walmart, would not be allowed to ring their bells, that they could never turn anybody down, which is the biggest load of crap.
Right.
The whole American landscape has changed. 50, 75 years ago, it was not an issue because everybody had stores on public streets.
Mm-hmm.
But in the last, 25, 30 years, whatever it is, the Main Street USA sort of gone away.
Right.
There aren't many of them. I only know of a couple in Princeton, New Jersey is one.
Mm-hmm.
It still has a Main Street. But most places have shopping centers.
Right.
New York, it's not a problem in Manhattan because, Fifth Avenue still belongs to the public.
Right.
But why in the world they would take that position, and this is so disingenuous. We couldn't turn down, Hamas if they wanted to go out there and collect money. Of course they could.
Yes, they could. My second question is, again, many years ago, you used to have a frequent caller named Chris from Abiquiu, New Mexico.
Yes.
You had expressed an interest in meeting him, and I'm wondering if you ever got a chance to meet him.
Never did. Chris was a very to-the-left Democrat. He did host a show for a short time on a local radio station,
mm-hmm.
and people would say, what do you let him on for? I enjoyed the guy.
Right.
We didn't agree that rain came out of the heaven. I mean, we agreed on nothing, but that isn't an issue. I enjoyed jousting with him,
mm-hmm.
and if Chris is listening yet in New Mexico, I would obviously have the door open during this last couple of days to him.
Right. So you haven't heard from him recently? Or
it's got to be 2 or 3 years at the least.
Okay.
And his health was not all the best. That I do know.
Okay. Well, listen, my best from my family and to you and your family, sir, and good luck in your future endeavors. Sir.
Well, thank you so very much. That's very generous of you, and thank you for remembering. I hadn't thought of Chris for a long period of time, and I still don't understand the logic of some of these. Well, we can't have anybody here soliciting, and they say, we contribute and all that. That's all very well. But this whole argument that somebody might feel intimidated because somebody is out there shaking a bell in front of a retail place to collect for the Salvation Army, or the Volunteers of America would be another that does that. Perfectly absurd. And I don't know that Target really helped themselves very much, because I'm sure there are at least some, like me, that simply won't buy there. That's all. I simply won't go. When I go to a chain drugstore, I go to Walgreens. Why? Because Walgreens allows the Salvation Army. Maybe CVS does too, but there's nobody out there doing it in my neighborhood. But Walgreens they have somebody out in front with a pot and shaking the bells. I repay that if I'm looking for a chain drugstore. Then go there. No big deal. I just think you pick on those that you don't agree with, and you reward those that do. That's one of the things I'm going to miss. Many things, but I'm going to miss. When I pick up a newspaper or watch a television show or listen to a radio broadcast, and I hear some of to me, now remember I'm qualifying that, some of the absurd things that come up in the news, at least now I can say, make a note of that, Bruce, because maybe you ought to talk about that. For example, I'm still... And I know there are arguments that you could make against and for and all the rest of it. But I still think this whole tempest in an enormous teapot about that guy that took his kids to work at JFK and allowed a couple of young kids to talk on the radio. Now, the bureaucrats, I'm trying to think of the guy's name from, might have been the FAA, somebody. He's been quoted. He's not a particularly good-looking guy, and he sits there and talks about, well, I don't think there's anything funny about this. It's deadly serious. Passengers are on those airplanes, yada, yada, yada. The pilots didn't seem to think it was so serious. One of them said, I wish I could bring my kids to work, and others said, awesome job or something. And one passenger interviewed today, and the guy said, well, how did they know that they were getting the right information? They should have jumped right on it. And so, you got to be kidding me. Well, of course, this guy doesn't know much about airplanes, but the regular flight guys had already told him, to go to the hold line and so on and so forth. And all the kid said in one case was flight so-and-so cleared for departure. And I am absolutely confident, among other things, that the crew is very alert, and we're looking down a runway to be sure it's open and so on. It's just a joke, but people getting so hyper about, oh my God, some kid talked on the radio. And what I talked about yesterday, and I'd be interested in hearing from one or two of you guys that are pilots, whether, I don't care, commercial, private, doesn't really matter. I have let at least 200 kids fly my airplane. Now, I was sitting right there, don't misunderstand me, but I'd let the kids put their feet on a rudder, and I'd let them sit there and hold the yoke and tell them, now, come on, pull it back, get the nose up a little bit and so forth. And if that was a major crime, come for me. But you'd have to arrest just about every pilot in the world, because everybody has done it with their friends and their kids. And it doesn't have to be a grown-up. Before my wife learned to fly, I used to show her what to hold on to and how to do it and so on and so forth. All of my grandchildren, the older ones, all got a chance to drive. And when I was a Young Eagles pilot, part of the EAA, I used to go out with 30, 40 kids in a day. Brought into the Young Eagles program was simply a program where you took kids for a ride, one pilot, one kid. Let them sit up front and see what the runway looks like and all that kind of good stuff. And I didn't have any major problem with that. And the Young Eagles, their goal was to fly a million kids. And I don't know if there's any great harm there. So if letting a kid talk on the radio is such a tragedy, oh my God, think of all those thousands of us that were flying in airspace with a little kid at the controls. Go figure. New London, New Hampshire. Hello there. I'd like to hear from a pilot or two, by the way. Tell me if you're a pilot, you've never let anybody do that when you're sitting in an airplane, unless the only thing you've ever flown is commercial equipment didn't belong to you, or you couldn't have anybody up there. But most of you have flown aircraft where you could have done it. Anyway, New London, New Hampshire. Hello there.
Good evening, Bruce.
Hi.
I just wanted to, I own WNTK in New Hampshire, and you've been on our air for 23 years, and wanted to thank you.
Well, you're very generous. It is I who thank you.
Well, it's mutual. We'll miss you, and we certainly wish you well. And I know people are relating stories. I never heard the story about the rat box, but it makes a lot of sense. I repeat one of the stories that you told about what people always say. You're the same. Where all people are equal. And
let me interrupt you, because I talked myself, and it's my fault, into a corner. Would you be generous enough to hang on for just a minute? And we get around the corner, then you and I can start with a clean blackboard, and I will be privileged. I'm Bruce Williams. If you'd like to join us, 877-287-4964. 877-287-4964. On the internet, ask Bruce at brucewilliams.com. I'm very fortunate to have a gentleman on the phone from New London, New Hampshire, who operates one of our affiliates, and we've been part of their family for a good long time. And it's guys like that and guys like you that have made this thing possible, and I will always be grateful for that. Now we have a brand new, clean blackboard. Your turn. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you again, Bruce. And I speak for all the listeners that throughout the country that have enjoyed your good advice over the years. I know personally, I recall one of your stories about you get pretty upset with people when they say, we're all equal, and you say, well, someone might be smarter and someone could be richer, someone could be stronger, someone has musical talents, and the only thing that we have equal in this world is the 24 hours, and it's what we do with it. And I've used that, over the years and learned it from your show. So
it's true. We all have the same deposit in our account. 24 hours a day, so many minutes and so many seconds. So many people squander that deposit in many ways. They will say, I'm working hard, but if you really analyze what they're doing, and I've certainly been guilty of this, and I bet you have from time to time. You waste time. You just don't. You're not really working 8 hours. You may be working 7 or 6, and there's a lot of slack in there. And it's the people that don't waste the time that become the Warren Buffetts of the world.
Well, it's sort of the corollary to your rat box story.
Indeed. And that rat box was an absolutely true story. It was my Uncle George. And when he finally sold his interest in that lumberyard, just about went broke in less than a year. The other guys came back to him, please come back, because he retired. What a dirty word. And he came back, and a year later was healthy again, and when he left the last time, they went broke. So he was obviously making contributions that nobody really recognized, understood, or gave him credit for.
It's not unusual in a lot of businesses. The key person is key in many ways. And when you're talking about the Jersey Boy pork roll, I just remember as a kid in Cape May, New Jersey, they used to sell pork roll on the boardwalk. They had a very small boardwalk in Cape May, but.
Oh, no, I know exactly what you mean. They had stores, and just like you have hamburger joints and hot dog places, they had pork roll stores.
Absolutely.
And pork roll, generally, I think, let's give credit where it was due. The likelihood is, if this is some years ago you're talking about, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It was Taylor ham is what they were selling.
I see. Yeah.
That was the biggest brand. Although Case is about the same age, 140 years, something of that order. But those stores were Taylor ham stores, at least when I was a kid. And they had them hanging from the ceiling all over the place, probably stuffed with sand or something.
Right off the boardwalk on the beach, the pork roll stores. Yeah,
that's exactly right, man.
It was a delicacy.
It still is.
It's a treat.
Indeed it is.
Well, you're a real treat, Bruce. I want to thank you again, and I'm sure we'll be hearing from you in some other capacity. But
well, that remains to be seen. As I signed the letter to you guys, to be continued. Thanks so very much. The telephone, 877-287-4964. So many people made this thing viable and successful over the last 35 years. And I am grateful to each of them. I'm Bruce Williams. Many of you have asked, will our products be available after I leave the program? And the answer is absolutely. My website will be up for the foreseeable future. Things like pork roll or ordering flowers from the potting shed or whatever, there will be a link on there. And plus, I will be updating it from time to time if there's something that I think you would be interested in knowing. Just BruceWilliams.com. New York, New York. Hello there.
Hello, Bruce. My name is Dick Brennan. I used to, never mind making calls to you, I used to take calls for you.
Dick Brennan from WOR.
That is absolutely right, Bruce. First of all, I just want to tell you, I worked for you for a long time, but what's most important, and now I'm in television, now I'm on TV, and I got to tell you, I learned so much from you, not about real estate, not about what kind of car to buy, not about what to invest in, but about life, about working hard and being successful. And I got to tell you, you were one of the greatest role models of my life, and I mean that with all my heart. And I just love to call in tonight and honor you, not just for what you do for everybody, but for what you've done for me and everybody who's ever sat behind the glass watching you at night.
Dick, I am very honored. Let me tell you, and this is the truth, and you will know that from what I'm going to tell you. You sent me a Christmas card 2 years ago with your kids and your wife, and that Christmas card is sitting on my dresser in my New Jersey home as we speak. And I intended to give you a call because your Christmas card this year said it was taken, was it in Maine or somewhere in New England?
As usual, your memory is impeccable. It's right on the shores of Maine. It was a great picture to take, yeah.
What were you doing up there?
Hey, you know, they actually gave us a week off, Bruce, and I know you wouldn't approve of that.
That's right. God bless America.
Bruce, if we have a second, I just want to tell you, Bruce, he would never take a day off. If he had to take a day off, he would always record the shows. And so we were so lucky when we think we'd get a day off, instead he'd make us work for tape 6 hours the day before.
That was Bill Lally and
Mike Thompson and Mark Simone. Right. And I have to tell you, Bruce, though, you like in my brain, like today, for example, we're working the longest day from hell, and I just hear all your lines and everything you ever said, and you have had such an impact on this business. And you know, it's not all the ratings you've had and all the great things you've done, but it's that one individual person whose life you turned around, who you said to, you know what, if you can't get a job here, why don't you move? If unemployment is tough, why don't you get a second job? And I know that sounds like tough medicine for a lot of people, but you've done it for so many people. And most of all, I really mean this. You've done it for me. You're such a huge impact on my life. Never mind broadcasting. I just hope you, in all your time, can appreciate what you've done for individual people out there and all the great times you brought to their lives because you gave them the tools and you gave me the tools.
You're very generous, Dick. I really mean that. And one of these first days, now that I've got all this extra time in my hands, I know how to get hold of you. I'm going to come into the city and we're going to have lunch.
Bruce, it is frightening to know that you would have extra time on your hands. Because I don't know what you would ever do with yourself. This is the guy, you got to sell trees when you're not selling this, and when you're not driving that, and when you're not on television or on radio or whatever the heck else you're doing. I don't know where you get the energy, but I can tell you. And I was thinking, going all the way back to the days of WMCA, and how you got. I remember how you told me how you got your original job. You made a zillion phone calls, and you wouldn't let the guy forget. You really walked the talk.
And I got a very nice email from Mr. Mason. He's over at CBS now, I believe, which I would certainly share with you. Thank you very much. Please give my best to your wife. And I should point out that I was there when you married that lady so many years ago. Dick was a Fordham University alumnus and an intern with us. I'm Bruce Williams. Well, hello there. How are you? I hope it finds you well. I'm Bruce Williams. Welcome, my friends. Welcome to my world. We talk to you, with you, and about you. Your life, your hopes, your ambitions, yes, and even your dreams. If you'd like to join us actively, 877-287-4964. 877-287-4964. If you would like to try the email route, ask Bruce at brucewilliams.com. In these remaining hours, if there's something happening in your life, something that I might be able to shed a little bit of a different point of view on, we'll not know unless you give me a yell. I cannot promise you that I can solve all of your problems or any of your problems. But I would like to take a shot. Tomorrow evening, we're going to play a little bit, and I'm very grateful to my friend Kevin, who cleaned up the original tape from 35 years ago. Bear in mind that this wasn't expected to last anyway, and my wife Ruth Ann taped the program on a cheap tape recorder off the air. Well, it's the only copy of that show, and the quality is pretty stinky, but it's what I have from May the 14th, 1975, and we are going to play you just a smidgen of the first telephone call I ever took on the air. And then there will be somewhere else tomorrow evening, we will play you the very first, a portion, not much, of the first network program, which originated November the 2nd, 1981, from 30 Rockefeller Plaza in New York City. That was a quantum leap from George Street in New Brunswick, New Jersey, in a relatively modest amount of time, with a interim period at WMCA New York Strauss Communications. Unfortunately, I was not able to find some of the tapes that I would like to have found from WMCA days, so you'll sort of take my word on that one. Goleta, California. Hello there.
Hello, Bruce. How are you?
I am just fine.
I'm sorry to hear you're leaving. I haven't felt this bad since I think Dr. Tony Grant left the air and went on to bigger and better things.
She was on our show for a little while, Tony Grant, out of New York City. What is she doing?
I
know she got married.
She retired a long time ago. She went to some conference or something in Hawaii and met the love of her life and got married, and then that other lady took her place, and I don't know, she was kind of mean. That would be Dr. Laura, of course.
Tony was very explicit in some of the things that she said.
Well,
that's okay. That's not a criticism, but it most surely is accurate.
Yep. But I just wanted to say I want to thank you for all these many years, and I'm sorry we couldn't go on our cruise with you, but our first granddaughter's going to be born sometime in April, and my wife didn't want to, upset that. If you should ever have another one, hope you'll use the email from the XM thing, and our address is in there. Mm-hmm. And possibly we'll go to that one.
There you go. Well, from time to time,
we bought the iPod just for you because we dumped the XM.
Well, I appreciate it. But from time to time, just take a look at our website, because whatever we'll be doing that's public will be on the website.
Well, I was going to ask Zach if you're going to continue on, and I assume you're going to be continuing to sell pork roll and all the other stuff. Is that true?
Yes, for the foreseeable future. Anything that, other than the cruise, that we were selling, we will continue on there'll be a link on the website for flowers and pork roll and possibly books. I made a decision to do what I'm doing, but there are dozens, if not hundreds, of loose ends which have to be addressed, and we'll start to do the loose end thing next week, but I am not going to make any decisions as to something I may or may not do until after the cruise has been completed.
Well, that sounds good. You could always, instead of making a CD, you could always put an MP3 file or similar to a podcast up on your website so people could download that instead of, making or writing a CD and sending the CD out.
Well, all of these things will be considered. Right now, I'm just want to complete this week with as much dignity as I am able, and then it'll be day to day for a few weeks.
Well, that's good. Well, I was listening to old iPod shows, and you mentioned you were going to go up in space if they'd let you. Have you decided on that?
Decided? I don't have $20 million to blow.
No, I thought it was the 100,000. You go up for 5 minutes.
Oh, that was that. Yeah, that. Well, that's still 2 or 3 years away.
Okay.
And now you're getting into physical condition, which may or may not be proper But for the $100,000, if it were available to me, that short ride, I would take that.
Do it. Okay.
The $20 million, well, that's obviously it's just a silly number, to go to the space station. If I were Mr. Buffett or others in similar financial condition, I'd be up and away. But who knows what that'll bring some years hence. Our telephone number, should you wish to join us, 877-287-4964. Alternatively, the web. Ask Bruce at BruceWilliams.com. I had a gentleman here for a couple of hours today who I have known for a good many years. He is the local reporter, his first name is Tom, for the Tampa Tribune, which is the largest daily newspaper in the Tampa area. And he writes about Pasco County, which is the county that I live in. Pasco County is big enough, you won't be able to find me with that little bit of information. But in any event, he was here for a considerable period today, during the morning and first part of the afternoon. And there will be a story, I guess, tomorrow in the Tampa Tribune. I'm not at all sure what Tom will include in that story, but I've said many, many times, Tom Jackson is his full name, that I'm not at all understanding why he stayed at a very good newspaper, but he is far more talented in terms of his writing skills, and I have no reason to even doubt for a moment that had he chosen to go on to bigger venues, I cannot imagine that he would have had any problem in securing that kind of a post. But for reasons known to him, not to me, he determined that he would stay here at the Tampa newspaper. And Tampa's gain is somebody else's loss, because Tom Jackson is an extremely, extremely talented writer. But tomorrow, I guess you could probably find it online if you choose, the Tampa Tribune in Tampa, Florida. Tom Jackson, I believe, will have some kind of a little story about me and my getting out of Dodge. We go to the Berg, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, KQV country. Hello there.
Hey, Bruce, how are you?
I am fine, thanks. Sounds like you're on a what do you call it, a conference phone or a speaker phone?
Oh, I'll try to speak louder. I'm sorry. I'm on I'm on my brand new iPhone.
On your iPhone?
Yes, it's Mike Thompson in Pittsburgh, PA.
No.
Absolutely.
Were you listening a little while ago, Michael?
I was not. I was actually trying to get through, and the phone lines are still jammed, so that's a great indication going out on top.
Dick Brennan called. And he mentioned your name, you rascal.
Well, listen, I, along with a lot of people that have worked with you over the years, and I first was, in fact, just speaking to Zach, your producer, and I said, well, I was a little younger when I worked with Bruce in 1981 at WMCA. If you recall, when you had the cigarettes still on the desk, and we did your demo for Talknet one night on the QT, kind of.
I recall the cigarettes. That's a whole other, as they say, program.
Well, listen.
But Mike went on to bigger things, and he is now the big boss of ESPN in Pittsburgh.
That's right, and a lot of the great memories that I had as a youngster in the broadcasting business. Thanks to you. You have an amazing career, and you've touched the lives of a lot of people, thousands and thousands of people that you've spoken to over the years, but certainly folks like me and Dick and Bill Lally and a lot of other folks really proud to have worked with you, and you contributed so much to our careers, and it's a great opportunity to thank you at this moment. which you're not slowing down. Anyone that knows you, you'll still be doing the Christmas trees, I think, every Christmas, I'm sure.
Something like that. I will manage to keep off of food stamps if I possibly can.
Well, listen, there's some great stories, some that we can tell on the air, some that we can't.
So that's true.
But I think one of my favorite ones, if you indulge, is that you have always been the kind of the common guy sitting at the kitchen table, giving sound advice to listeners over the years, and that common man, despite the fame and everything that you've achieved in your career, you were always just Bruce from New Jersey, and I'll never forget, we used to occasionally go to a restaurant before the show called the King of the Sea, if you recall.
Yeah. Oh, of course I recall. It was downstairs from Rosie O'Grady's on 56th Street and 7th Avenue.
Correct. So we're sitting there at the table, and the maitre d' or the waiter comes over, and he has a bit of a phony French accent, and he's going around the table and saying, we have the escargot, the Chateaubriand, blah, blah. Mr. Williams, what would you like? And you go to the guy, I'll just have a tuna fish sandwich. and the guy is all verklempt, and he goes, but Mr. Williams, we do not have tuna fish. He goes, come on, you got to have tuna fish. I mean, what do the help eat? And lo and behold, as we're eating the Chateaubriand, you're eating the tuna fish sandwich.
Well, I appreciate it, Mike. The very best to all of you. I'm Bruce Williams. Kind of a postscript to that last call. Mike Thompson was a screener, board op, whatever, for me when I was at NBC. And then, of course, he went on to much other and better things. But I know precisely when Mike was born. Now, why would I know that? Because Mike was born the day that I was discharged from the Air Force. And we figured at the time I was riding up the New Jersey Turnpike when they finally turned me loose in Washington, D.C. early because it was a holiday. It was Thanksgiving Day. So Mike is, I always call him on his birthday if I can locate him, and he keeps moving up the broadcast ladder to a very, very responsible position now in Pittsburgh. Prior to that, he was running the ESPN outlet in New York City. You're not in the business, that wouldn't mean a whole lot, but these guys are having some pretty heavy stuff. Zach looked up, who did you look up? I've forgotten now. Oh, Dick Brennan. And Dick, I know Dick is a talking head, a television guy in New York City, which is, let me tell you, that's the top of the line. And he is the political reporter for Fox in New York City. Not too bad, some of my alumni. So, dear Bruce, I first heard you on KBTM in Jonesboro, Arkansas, 14 years ago. After I couldn't get you on local radio, I subscribed to XM. I've spoken to you several times, and my wife has called. Personally, I don't think you'll be away from broadcasting for very long. In fact, I visually see you very soon sitting on your pontoon boat in international waters broadcasting from a pirate radio station. When this happens, I'll need to purchase a shortwave receiver. Dear friend, I'll be waiting patiently to hear your voice again. Isn't that nice? And the subject is Can't Say Goodbye. So many of you have sent these marvelous emails, and one of the things I hope I will be able to put together, because I'm trying to very carefully preserve them all, is a reply to each of you. Our telephone number, 877-287-4964. We go to the cereal capital of the world, Battle Creek, Michigan.
Hello, Bruce.
Good evening.
This is Glenn in Battle Creek. Just couldn't have the show go off without me saying goodbye.
Well, thank you, Glenn. I appreciate that.
I've listened to you, Bruce, for most of your career, off and on.
Well, I appreciate that as well. I remember doing a couple of public appearances in Battle Creek.
Ooh, I wish I'd seen them.
That was the place where, when you were a kid, you always had to send a box top and a dime to get a space ring or a decoder or some such thing.
Yeah.
That was where it was. Kellogg's
Kellogg's and Post and
big cereals guy, sure.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate your call, my friend, and please stay in touch. It's so nice to talk to so many of you guys that I have gotten to learn to know along the party line. And I mean that sincerely. In about 2 minutes, I probably won't get done with this. And this is one of the reasons I'm going to miss this stuff, to be able to comment about this. Well, what do you think about these kids? Many places in the country, California leading the charge. California has a $20 billion budget deficit. $20 billion. And the kids in the universities, some of them they had closed down today. Some high schools closed down, and even elementary schools. The kids are demonstrating about the cuts from the state level, because I remember one of the signs I saw was, I can't afford my education. Well, I'm thinking if you can't afford it, then quit school, get a job, save some money for a couple of years, and maybe you can afford your education. But these students are in big numbers, and of course they can get people all excited on Twitter and on Facebook and whatever. They can get their friends and whatever out there demonstrating in the streets. Where in heaven's name do they think the money is going to come from for this education that, quote, they can't afford? And naturally it's a racial thing, and big signs about how people should be paying their tuition. After all, they're students and they deserve it. No, they don't. They don't deserve it. What they deserve is an opportunity. And if it means taking a couple of years off to save some money, what is wrong with that? Or if it means working 30 or 40 hours a week while you're an undergraduate, is that's some kind of a great immorality? I don't see it. I may or may not get back to this after the break. I'd like to know what you think about it. I'm Bruce Williams. Our telephone number, simply used, open lines at 877-287-4964. Columbus, Ohio. Welcome to my world.
Hi, Bruce. It's so good to talk with you. I can't even tell you how much I'm going to miss listening to you every day. And I'll tell you what, you put several $1,000s in my pocket, and I can't thank you enough for that.
Well, I'm very appreciative that something worked.
Yes. And one observation I wanted to make, and I'm sure others have made the same thing, but you are unique in the radio in that, like, compared with the conservative talk show hosts, and I like those guys, but they're all pretty interchangeable. They all pretty much do the same thing. There's no one who I know of who does what you do.
Well, that's appreciated. I know that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, or so it's said. And I know there are shows out that were modeled after whatever it is I did. That's okay. That's going to happen. But I like to think there are some things I've done that are a little different than the other guys.
I have one question I had for you, and you may have touched on this, but if you did, I've missed it. I remember you talking, of course, you've talked about your daycare center, and then I've heard you talk about sending, and I can't remember how many letters or notes it was mind-boggling to the producer or whomever.
To Dan, WMCA in New York City, over 3,000 telephone calls and over 500 letters, yes.
Yes, that is really amazing. But I guess my question is, what actually led you to to have such a passion to have a radio show?
Well, I was already doing one at that time. I was doing one at WCTC and WQMR in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and the next logical, well, not really, it wasn't logical. It was illogical to think you're going to go from the little leagues to the major leagues in one jump, but I wasn't aware of that. So that's the kind of a jump I was trying to take. And I had really little choice. WOR was the only other talk station in New York City at that time, and they had Bernie Meltzer, who was doing a very similar show, and the guy that I first listened to, and I said, I can do that, and in my own mind, I thought better than you can. Whether I could or not is another story. But I really had no place else to go other than to WMCA. And so I assaulted WMCA. I called them about on the average of 3 times a day for thousands of phone calls. And it's just, people would say, well, you're going to blank them off, right?
Right.
I'd say, so what? I got nothing. There's nowhere to go when you're at the bottom but up. So if they're angry with me, at least they'll know who I am. And that was my attitude. I called and I sent letters. I sent, they had a name for them at the time. They were like a telegram, mailgrams they called them. They're cheaper than a regular telegram, and you could call up and dictate them on a telephone. I sent mailgrams to Mrs. Strauss and to Mr. Mason, who was a super guy. Mrs. Strauss, Ellen Strauss, was a Salzburger. Do you know that? Does that name mean anything?
No.
Well, they're the people who own the New York Times.
Oh, okay.
The Salzburger family. And Peter Strauss, obviously a Strauss, that was the Macy family. So that was quite a marriage, the Strausses and the Salzburgers to start, or to run that organization. But Mrs. Strauss ran the joint because Peter Strauss was a supporter of Jimmy Carter, and when Mr. Carter got elected, he was made the head of Voice of America. So he went to Washington, and Ellen ran the radio station, and he is still Peter Strauss is still alive. He's now married to Monica Lewinsky's mother. How about that? But in any event, we were kind of shrinking. The radio business was getting affected, so instead of having this huge office complex where everybody had their own office, suddenly the room got called the bullpen, where there were half a dozen of us in this one room. Sally Raphael was in that room, Bob Grant. There were a couple that still, Barry Farber, that still had their own offices. I was not one of those. And I used to stick around at night answering none of this I had to do. It wasn't part of my job description. But I used to open the mail and look at it and answer a lot of the mail and all that sort of crap, right? Mm-hmm. Well, but a byproduct of that was my desk looked pretty much like the desk that I'm sitting at now, an adjunct, kind of a adjunct to the village dump. I'm not the neatest person when it comes to that sort of an activity. Well, one day, Mrs. Strauss comes in, and I'm sitting there on my own time. I finished the show at 4 o'clock, and I was going to take the train at 5 or 5:15 or whatever. And she looks at me and says, "This desk is a disgrace." And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "I want it cleaned, and I have guests coming tomorrow, and I can't have them looking at this." I said, "Fine, Mrs. Strauss, I'll be glad to." And I took my arms and I swept everything, telephones, everything, right on the floor, got up and walked out. Came back the next day. And the desk is nicely straightened out. The phones are back on the hook and whatever, and I never heard another word about keeping my desk clean.
Well, Bruce, one thing I've noted about you is that you've mellowed through the years. When people used to call you they'd say, Bruce, how you doing? And you just kind of ignore that, and you'd go on. Now you say, I'm doing fine, and you're just so kind and polite to everyone. And also, I just wanted to say I was really touched by your wife's letter read on the air.
Wasn't that? And that was 100% totally surprised. I mean, my office knew they were going to do it. Zach knew that they were going to do it. Nobody. I'm sitting here fat, dumb, and stupid, my feet up in the air, and I thought at first the guy was just going to come up with something kind of funny, because there have been a lot of poetry and stuff sent to me. Had no idea whatever that Susan actually wrote that letter. None. And it was touching, and I'm blessed to have a wonderful wife.
Well, that's great. And just one last observation. The weirdest call that I've heard you get was that guy about 6 months ago who wanted to join you and your wife in the cabin. Do you remember that?
Anyway.
So, Bruce, we will. Well, I'll miss you so much, and just I hope you land back on the airwaves some way, the internet, whatever, because we're just going to miss you.
I'm very appreciative of the comment. Thank you very much. Now, it was not an easy decision, as I have said numerous times in the last couple of weeks. It was a decision that I agonized over for a rather long period of time. Long relative to when I had decided just to either blank or get, Fisher cut bait or any one of those things. I think it was the appropriate decision to make at this time in my life. Whether I never have learned, never say never. Never say, I'll never do that, or I'll never talk to him or to her or whatever. Never has time coming around. And there's an example of that in my life. When I had the airplane crash in 1982, a friend had called me and asked me what I was doing that day. I heard you got a new airplane, and I got a friend or two that would like to go for a ride. Well, why not? It was Sunday. I got some work done, and I met him, and there were four of us, I guess. Four of us. So two guys, he and another guy gets into my plane, and the other two guys get in the other airplane. We fly it out somewhere, had breakfast. That's what it came down to. Uneventful ride. And then he got into the other airplane with a person that flew down me, and these other two fellows get in the plane, and we fly back. That flight was anything but uneventful. Now, Henry was our town attorney. He was the Republican lawyer, good friend. Used to see him socially regularly, and I think he'd actually done some legal work for me as well. Well, after the airplane incident, where I was incapacitated for a significant period of time, the accident was on 5 December, and I really have very little, a little bit, but very little recollection of the time between then and the first of the year. In a moment, I'll tell you why he and I had a difference of opinion. I'm Bruce Williams. I was recounting the fact that a friend, Henry Spritzer, set up the airplane flight where we had the accident with his friends. One guy I had met before, the other two guys I never saw again. But in any event, after the accident, sometime, obviously there's going to be a lawsuit, and there was, but I couldn't believe it. It was Henry's firm representing one of the passengers in my airplane. I called him. I said, what? You were the guy that set this whole thing up. You and I have been friends. He said, look, somebody's going to represent him. It may as well be me. Well, I can tell you for several years, I wanted nothing to do with Hank. I'd done a lot for him and he for me, and we were good friends personally and did a lot of things socially. Suddenly I got thinking about it and thinking, well, what he did, in my opinion, was wrong. He should not have been representing them. But on the other side of that, you don't meet a whole lot of people in your life who you really have some affection for. And I went to see the guy, and I said, look, Hank, I don't like what you did, but on the other hand, and I shook hands with him. And I'm very pleased that I did. He didn't live all that much longer beyond that. And I'm very pleased that I reconciled with him, and I would suggest to you that you might keep that in mind if you're having a serious disagreement with someone that you're pretty close to. After they go to room temperature, you don't have a chance to shake that hand. Oahu, Hawaii, aloha.
Aloha, Bruce.
Hello there. What's up?
Hi, Bruce. I'm actually calling from the Big Island of Hawaii, which I know you're familiar with.
Yes, indeed.
And I just called to say how much I'm going to miss you. I've listened to you for many, many, many years, and actually came down to hear your live broadcast at the Hyatt Regency Waikiki.
Oh, yes.
Quite a few years ago. And
that was right after 9/11 when I did that around the world thing to prove that flying was safe.
Yes,
sure.
You're exactly right. Yep, I remember you doing that. Yeah, and I've got a couple of your books. Just bought a house this year and found your book House Smart very enlightening. And I just want to thank you for many, many hours of pleasure. Lots of great advice, not just given to me on the several phone calls I've made to you, but the calls that I've heard of others making. And I like your attitude. I like your style. I think you're a very cool guy, and I'm going to miss you.
Well, you are very gracious, and I appreciate you taking the time to call. I often have tried to remember the name of that hotel, and we were, it was right after 9/11, and what was the name of the hotel?
It was the Hyatt Regency.
Hyatt? Well, it was like 20, 25 stories?
Probably about there. You were on sort of the mezzanine level.
Yeah, I was out in the restaurant, but the point is, I've got a suite that, you could have entertained a couple hundred people in. The whole tower was empty because nobody wanted to fly anywhere, and Hawaii was in a funk because I was asked by the governor's office to stick around for a couple of days because they needed somebody to say nice things about Hawaii. And I was doing a 48,000-mile, twice-around-the-world trip to demonstrate that flying was safe. And when I heard that I was going to wind up in Hawaii for a while, I called my wife. I said, I don't mind doing this flying all over the place by myself, but if I'm going to spend 3 days in Hawaii, guess who else is going to spend 3 days in Hawaii?
Well, Hawaii's not a bad place to spend 3 days or 3 years or 30 years in.
Well, that's another program. I met a guy at that broadcast. He came over to see me. It was Bob Langan, and he is one of Hawaii's premier orthopedic surgeons. Oh. And we have become good friends since that time, gotten together here and there. We've been on cruises together, and he and Carol have become really wonderful people. He worked for Kaiser, and cutting people open and all that good stuff, none of which I could ever do. But Bob and Carol are close friends, and that was the best part of that whole trip, meeting those two. I do wish you well, my dear. Thank you so very, very much. Boy, that hotel, it's a gorgeous luxury hotel with this huge suite and so on and so forth. Because there was nobody there, the only thing you could get from room service was a hamburger. That's how empty that hotel was. And the main drag, whatever it is, the stores were absolutely deserted. Mercifully, Hawaii had recovered. Now they're having a problem again with the recession, but mercifully they recovered. But for me, and for Susan, meeting Bob and Carol was a big part of that trip. Probably the biggest. I'm Bruce Williams. There was a story on the New York News tonight, and my reaction will very likely surprise at least some of my friends as to the end of the story, which I guess really hasn't been finalized. It was a story from a place called Wayne, New Jersey, which is in the northern part of New Jersey, one of the burbs, I guess one could say, for the Big Apple. And people in Wayne were complaining for quite some period of time. They would find garbage cans turned over and that sort of nothing real serious. Well, it turned out that with security cameras grinding away, they finally determined that the miscreant with the garbage cans was a black bear. And the black bear was a big, I don't know how big black bears get, but this guy was somewhere under, but not that far under 400 pounds. And they had picked him up on cameras, and people, of course, were concerned that this guy is roaming around their suburban neighborhood. Well, I guess earlier today, the bear tangled with an old 16-year-old dog and killed the dog. And that's always, if you're a dog lover, you know, having a dog killed is traumatic, and the owner was upset and so on and so forth. Well, the SPA people and the local gendarmes finally caught sight of this guy, and they tranked him. They popped him with a trank gun and knocked him out and captured him and finally restrained him and took him wherever you take bears. And the last part of the story, it says they were going to euthanize the bear because he killed a dog. And I'm thinking, the bear didn't do anything that a bear is not supposed to do. Now, I'm sure the owner of the dog was upset, as would I have been. But I hope that even if it were a dog that belonged to me, I, like a lot of people in Wayne, New Jersey, have contacted the authorities and said, why is it necessary to euthanize this animal? And I would hope that maybe if somebody is listening in the Wayne, New Jersey area of any authority, and I will make a phone call tomorrow, say, take the bear up into the mountains of Pennsylvania somewhere. There's not very far away, there's ample room for a bear to readjust. Just because he killed a dog, and they have something about it, if a wild animal kills a pet, they have to be done away with. And I'm a dog lover as much as anybody on the planet, but I think the people in Wayne ought to rethink this one. What do you think? I'm Bruce Williams. At $10. Order yours now. Hello there. How you doing? I sure hope well. I'm Bruce Williams. Welcome. Welcome to my world as we talk to you, with you, and about you. Your life, your hopes, and even your dreams. Over the weekend, we were in the car, and I was looking for a particular CD of something I was going to share with you guys, and there was a CD of a show that I did some time ago. I don't know how many years ago. The show was about a young soldier, barely 18, who found himself in France during World War I. My friend Bob, my wife's dad, asked me if I ever heard of Robert Service, and I said, well, of course I have. He was a writer that wrote about a number of things, but my acquaintance with Robert Service had to do with Alaska. And he said, yeah. And he said he showed me a diary that was kept by this young soldier, World War I in France in 1918. Now, this young soldier had very little formal education. I'm not sure how much, but certainly never finished high school. and yet his handwriting was clear and easy to read. His spelling and grammar were, there were mistakes, but not many. And he was quoting Robert Service, the shooting of Dan McGrew. I'm wondering where this kid with limited education would come across this. Well, one thing was obvious in those years. People read and wrote more than they do today. Well, I was captivated by all this. This young man was my wife's grandfather. And there were some other things that I won't get into that I wish I had time for. But the point was, I was impressed with his handwriting, with his knowledge of an author that many of you would not know and never been acquainted with. And when Bob asked me if I had ever knew what the poem of the shooting of Dan McGrew and the lady known as Lou, of course I knew. And I read it on the air. First time I ever did something like that. Well, as I was tooling down the highway listening to this relatively old CD, I was thinking, there was another Robert Service writing that was as famous, I guess, as the shooting of Dan McGrew, and certainly every bit as good. You see, this guy, I thought until I did some homework, because of this little diary, I thought this guy was an Alaskan. Robert Service was not. He was a Scotsman. And he went to Alaska all the way from Scotland. Now, that was not like hopping on a jet today. This is 100 years ago. And he wrote just as if he lived there. And years later, I actually, on the program, was selling some Robert Service tapes. And I would urge you, get yourself acquainted with him. Well, the other work that I remembered well was the cremation of Sam McGee. And with all apologies to people who know how to read things, with the proper pronunciations and inflections, on these last few hours I have remaining, I would like to share with you the cremation of Sam McGee. There are strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold. The Arctic trails have their secret tales that would make your blood run cold. The northern lights have seen queer sights, but the queerest they ever did see was that night on the marge of Lake LaBarge. I cremated Sam McGee. Now, Sam McGee was from Tennessee, where the cotton blossoms and blows, and why he left his home in the South to roam round the pole, God only knows. He was always cold, but the land of gold seemed to hold him like a spell, though he'd often say in his homely way he'd sooner live in hell. On a Christmas day, we were mushing our way over the Dawson Trail. Talk of your cold! Through the parka's fold it stabbed like a driven nail. If our eyes we'd closed and the lashes froze till sometimes we couldn't see, it wasn't much fun, but only one to whimper was Sam McGee. And that very night, as we lay packed tight in our robes beneath the snow, and the dogs were fed and the stars overhead were dancing heel and toe, he turned to me, and Cap, says he, I'll cash in this trip, I guess. And if I do, I'm asking you won't refuse my last request. Well, he seemed so low that I couldn't say no, and he says with sort of a moan, it's the cursed cold, and it's got right hold till I'm chilled clean through to the bone. Yet 'tain't being dead, it's my awful dread of the icy grave that pains. So I want you to swear that foul or fail, you'll cremate my last remains. A pal's last need is a thing to heed, so I swore I would not fail. And we started at the streak of dawn. By God, he looked ghostly pale. He crouched on the sleigh, and he raved all day of his home in Tennessee. And before nightfall, a corpse was all that was left of Sam McGee. There wasn't a breath in that land of death, and I hurried harder driven. With a corpse half hid that I couldn't get rid because of a promise given, it was lashed to the sleigh, and it seemed to say, you may tax your brawn and brains, but you promise true, and it's up to you to cremate these last remains. Now, a promise made is a debt unpaid, and the trail has its own stern code. In the days to come, though my lips were dumb, in my heart how I cursed that load. In the long, long night, by the long firelight, while the huskies round in a ring howled out their woes to the homeless snows, oh God, how I loathed the thing. And every day in the quiet clay seemed too heavy and heavier grow, and on I went, though the dogs were spent and the grub was getting low. The trail was bad, and I felt half mad, but I swore I would not give in. I'd often sing to that hateful thing, and it hearkened with a grin, till I came to the marge of Lake Labarge, and a derelict there lay. It was jammed in the ice, but I saw in a trice it was called the Alice May. And I looked at it, and I thought a bit, and I looked at my frozen chum, and then here I said with a sudden cry, is my crematorium. Some planks I tore from the cabin floor, and I lit the boiler fire. Some coal I found was lying around, and I heaped the fuel higher. The flames just soared, and the furnace roared, such a blaze you seldom see. And I burrowed a hole in the glowing coal, and I stuffed in Sam McGee. Then I made a hike, for I didn't like to hear him sizzle so, and the heavens scowled, and the huskies howled, and the wind began to blow. It was icy cold, but the hot sweat rolled down my cheeks. I don't know why. And the greasy smoke in an inky cloak went streaking down the sky. I don't know how long in the snow I wrestled with grisly fear, but the stars came out, and they danced about ere again I ventured near. I was sick with dread, but I bravely said, I'll just take a peep inside. I guess he's cooked, and it's time I looked. Then the door I opened wide, and there sat Sam, looking cool and calm in the heart of the furnace roar. And he wore a smile you could see a mile, and he said, please, close that door. It's fine in here, but I greatly fear you'll let in the cold and storm. Since I left Plumtree down in Tennessee, it's the first time I've been warned. There are strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold. The Arctic trails have their secret tales that would make your blood run cold. The northern lights have seen queer sights, but the queerest they ever did see was that night on the marge of Lake Labarge. I cremated Sam McGee. Robert W. Service. Now, is it profound? No. But it surely is enormously well written. I would urge you to indulge, just as that 18-year-old soldier in 1918 in France read Robert Service. I hope you've enjoyed it. I apologize if you've been bored, but it was a pleasure once again to introduce you to what I think is outstanding stuff. Oshkosh, Wisconsin, thank you for your patience. What's up?
That was not boring, Bruce. That was very nice.
Well, thank you.
And thank you. I just wanted to call and say that many, many years of listening to you on the radio have been a pleasure. I started listening to you back when I was 18, and I'm now 45, 46. Yeah, after a while you forget how old you are, but I really, really thank you for all the years of enjoyment on the radio. I've been had the pleasure of meeting you one time up there in Neenah, Wisconsin, at one of your, when you came in and talked, at the stage shows.
Right.
Shook your hand, got an autograph, still have the autograph picture, and just really, really, really want to thank you.
Well, you're very, very gracious. I enjoyed clearly meeting thousands and thousands of you, and I enjoyed doing those shows, and, it was a time of my life. That's what I was doing, and it was a great deal of fun, and I just met so many gracious people, it's hard to remember. And this little thing, I found a tape jogging when I did something similar to this. I thought why not look it up and do another? But you've been very, very kind, you and so many others. I can only say thank you to each of you. I'm Bruce Williams. 877-287-4964. Got an open line or two for you. Or ask Bruce at brucewilliams.com. Lubbock, Texas. Hello there.
Hello, Bruce. Bruce, I finished watching the Olympics, and I said, okay, now I can tune back into my favorite radio talk show host Monday, and I didn't hear the first part, but I tuned in the middle and heard this talk about you leaving, and I'm going, what? I'm sure glad that you didn't decide to sign off during the Olympics, or because I would have never gotten a chance to hear you, at least not live. And I did want to call in and say I've been listening to you since the 80s in Colorado Springs, and then when I moved back to Texas, found you here, and then more recently on the internet. And I mean, your leaving will leave a big void.
Well, you're very kind. I appreciate that.
I love the poem, by the way.
Thank you. You ought to try Robert Service. You can find him in the library or on. I'm sure that at a major bookstore you could find it. It's not expensive, and he had an unusual gift for writing, as I said, about the Malamute Saloon and all this sort of thing. And I thought he was an Alaskan. He was not. Just visited there for a modest period of time. Well, close to 100 years ago, and well worth listening to. There are a whole bunch of guys in Alaska, that run big machinery and stuff, so they're alone a lot. They memorize this, and then they recite Robert Service at public places and whatever. Well worth listening to. Anyway, what do I know? But I was impressed by my wife's grandfather as a young kid, modestly educated, but he could write down most of the shooting of Dan McGrew from memory. Pretty impressive. I thank you very, very much for joining me, my friend. I truly do. I'm sorry. I made a couple of notes that I found, to me, was kind of interesting, not so interesting, little blurbers. For example, more of the airlines, I know they're hungry for money. I know they got problems for money. I endorse the idea of charging for luggage because so many people thought they could take their whole household effects on an airplane and just check them in. And if you really wanted to see that, go on a flight to San Juan, where people were coming back that had visited up in the contiguous 48, and were bringing back everything, I swear, but the kitchen sink. Amazing. Well, now you got to pay for all that sort of thing, and I don't disagree. I think that carry-on beyond a relatively modest size also ought to be surcharged and make it less expensive to check it than to carry it through and have the people in security having to do all kinds of marvelous things. Now they're talking about having a new machine. It's already in use in Europe. You may not have to take your shoes off. I'm sure I'll have to because the metal thing will go off, so I will not be excused from removing my shoes. But that would be a nice, no pun intended, a step in the right direction. Knoxville, hello there.
Good evening, Bruce.
Good evening.
It is a pleasure to speak to you once again, and actually I'm in your neck of the woods. I'm down here in Tampa.
Are you really? What are you doing in Tampa?
Sir. I have to deliver a load of roofing to a roofing company here in the morning.
Uh-huh. Well,
I'm one of your
cold.
truck drivers.
I bet you're going to be cold tonight then.
It was chilly, 45, and actually I had to put the sweater on my Boston Terrier so I could take her out. But,
I can believe that. This is not Florida weather. Somebody has pulled the wrong switch someplace.
You need to turn the heat back on, Bruce.
I have my fireplace going constantly. I do. I have a gas fireplace, which I'm very fond of. You know, you don't have to worry about logs and that kind of stuff. And here in Florida, logs can be a problem because they attract termites. Really?
Yes.
So I have a gas fireplace that is going constantly, and when I finish tonight, I will go downstairs and very likely have a little adult beverage and sit by the fire with my wife.
And I bet the boys just love it, and they'll just lay right in front of it, won't they?
They will be there. Not a question about it.
And my mom also wanted me to tell you that she's going to miss hearing you on the radio. And she wanted me to convey to you, remember when you had to drive from, Kalamazoo, Michigan, back over to Detroit during that big snowstorm you talked about before?
I remember it better than you can ever imagine because my wife, who I did not know at the time, that was the first performance she came to.
Well, my mom had a set of tickets for it, and a friend that she was going to bring with her didn't want to go, and she said there was no way she was going to miss it, and she enjoyed very much being able to see you.
That was at the big hotel in Grand Rapids, and as I said, it was the first time I think Sue ever saw me in person, and well, for me, happily, it continued. I'm Bruce Williams. Into our remaining half hour of our next to last adventure. And by the way, I do have both of the dog, the poem, and the Rainbow Bridge, which many of you have requested. And I may read one tonight. It's unlikely, but I may. But they will both be read before our final bow. Salt Lake City. Hello there.
Hey, Bruce.
Good evening.
How you doing?
I am doing real well, thank you.
I'm actually about an hour out of Salt Lake, but I'm headed that way. I just left from your in-laws. I think your in-laws, aren't they from Reno now?
No, they live in the Grand Rapids.
Oh, I was thinking Tahoe, Tahoe, Reno area. But anyway, I just called to tell you I went to work for the outfit the same year you went national, and I just wanted to thank you for the high drive, and the millions of drivers probably want to say thanks to you.
Well, that's very kind of you. I know that we do have a lot of fellows that are driving truck because they're in there so long, and I also know we lost a lot of them because of the XM thing that was reduced from 7 or 8 years of 3 hours a night down to 1. But things happen in this life, and that was just one of them. But I'm very happy we've been able to keep so many of you guys company. I could not do what you do. Just couldn't do it. I mean, I drove a truck and all that sort of thing, and I can back a trailer and the rest of it. But I just couldn't do day after day and week after week what you guys do.
It's a pound, but we get her done. And but guys like you sure help us. And over the years, you helped me get into the rental business and out of the rental business, and that done real well for us. And I wouldn't have done it without you. And just a whole bunch of things that you've helped us out that you have no idea how much you helped us. So,
well, you're very gracious, and I appreciate that, my friend. I thank you very, very much. You keep on trucking, and who knows, our paths may cross again. These are not the pleasantest stories in the world, but I think it was necessary, and you don't have to be real insightful to figure out what the religion involved was. A British airport says 2 women who refused to go through a full-body scanner have been barred from boarding a flight. Manchester Airport. They say the women who were believed to have been booked to fly out to Islamabad should give you a clue, refused to be scanned, citing medical, and I don't know what that would be, and religious reasons. And you can guess what that is. The airport said in a statement Wednesday that the passengers were not permitted to fly in accordance with the government directive on scanners. Britain is introducing more full-body scanners to strengthen aviation security. Privacy advocates say the technology amounts to virtual strip searching. And that's an enormous major league jump, in my opinion. The airport says strict procedures are in place to protect the privacy of passengers who are randomly selected to go through the scanner. Well, there's going to be a lot more of that coming down because you're going to see more and more scanners in place. I started to talk about this earlier, and I am in favor of airlines taking in more money. I'm starting to wonder how, well, I don't have to wonder. Ryanair, which is a discount carrier, I think they're based in Ireland, but they certainly are a big deal in Europe, is talking about charging you to go to the bathroom. Yeah, you're going to have a chit of some kind to get into the John on an airplane. I am not persuaded that I want to sit next to somebody who either doesn't or will not spend the money, who really has a need, but that's another matter. Continental, and everybody knows that's my airline of choice because they go where I went for many, many years, and the only company that went nonstop. So I flew them a great deal. Continental is going to start charging extra if you want a seat with more legroom. Now, that is pretty reasonable. Why not just have some extra seats with more legroom? But Continental said they will give customers the option to buy the roomier seats beginning March 17th. Or put another way, they will now give you the option to sit where you always wanted to sit in coach if you could get there first, but now you're going to pay for it. Prices? Well, they'll depend on the length of the flight and the popularity of the route. A spokesman says extra room, for example, on a Houston, New York flight. Now, this is, you already got to pay for the coach seat, right? You want a drink, you got to pay for that. And they do serve meals on Continental without extra charge so far. But if you want to go from, it actually would be Houston to Newark, $59 extra. That is a little pricey. The airline doesn't plan to reconfigure its plane, but instead it will charge extra for those who want to sit in exit row seats, and I surely would like to. They have at least 7 inches more legroom than the other rows in coach. Now, people, and I'm one of them, I guess, of Continental's frequent flyer program, the top levels, will be able to claim the exit row without extra charge. And, you know, I don't necessarily disagree with a la carte pricing. I don't disagree with a la carte pricing. If you want a meal on an airplane, seems to me that you shouldn't object to paying for it. Well, it's always free. It's never been free. It was always included in the price. The same thing can be said for baggage. It was never free. It was packaged into the price. And if you really want to get upset, take a look at what else is packaged in to your price of the airplane ticket. I mean, I don't mean the airlines, but the airports and the states and the cities and anybody else who can possibly get their oar in the water. I'm surprised they don't tax you for the first 2 breaths you take when you get off on the jetway. I mean, they got taxes for airport improvement, runway improvement, tourism. You pay a tax in many cases, so the city or county or whatever it is can promote tourism to their part of the country so more people can pay taxes and so on and so forth. It goes on forever. The taxes, well, nobody likes paying taxes. And, of course, you can always screw the traveler because the traveler doesn't vote where the taxes are being collected, and it kind of evens itself out because you do live somewhere, and people are getting screwed that are coming to your part of the area. I really think that the taxes should be revisited. But the reality is they're not going to be, because counties and cities and states are broke. They're busted. They're not busted because of you, a traveler, renting cars or whatever. They're busted because universally, I think there's only 2 states that aren't up in hock up to their eyebrows, and I want to say one of them is one of the Dakotas, and I could be mistaken about that. But otherwise, you take the northern states like New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, the West Coast states such as Washington, California. These legislators have spent insulting the drunken sailor. They have made deals with unions to hire more union people. There are more union members now who are government employees than work for private organizations. In all the history of unionism, that hasn't been the case. But now there are more government employees in unions than there are people in private industry. And certainly in many of these states, the politicians have made deals with the devil. The unions supported the incumbents in many cases, and now they want their pound of flesh. You don't start laying off our people. After all, don't you remember who contributed to your campaign? Don't you remember who got the vote out so you are where you are, Mr. So-and-so or Ms. So-and-so? And the unions, and I don't blame them really, they're coming back for their pound of flesh. They figure they paid for it. And I guess they did when you come right down to it. They paid for it. But the fact is that I won't be around doing this sort of thing. These are not political statements. These are statements of fact about government. The government of your county, state, your town, they have the people that run it. Well, I'm sure many of them are very well-intentioned. They're not crooks or anything. But they're spending money they don't have, sometimes because they just think it has to be done, many times to ensure their electability. But, my friends, it must stop. I'm Bruce Williams. 877-287-4964. We're going to Topeka. Hello there.
Good evening, Bruce.
Good evening.
I just wanted to first off say thank you. I started listening to you in the mid-'90s, and you look at you like a good uncle who gives great advice.
Well, you're very generous. That's appreciated.
The reason I'm calling tonight is looking to maybe do a cruise with the family. I've got a 7-year-old and 4-year-old, and I'm going to be going on a deployment next year, and we were thinking about doing a cruise this summer.
Well, because you're going on deployment, I could say, yeah. I don't really... Well, I took my kids when they were as young as yours. Whether they got much... Well, I took it for as much transportation. I was in the Virgin Islands, and I took the France, which was the ship of the day, back to New York. But having said that, as much as you love your kids, you might want to think about just taking your bride on this one.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of responsibility with the kids, and as young as that, yeah, they have nursery school on some of them and whatever, but there's not much there truly for children. And it might be kind of nice to spend some time with your wife alone for a week. Where are you planning on going?
I wasn't sure. We just started talking about what ideas to do, and a cruise came up, and I thought, well, Bruce always talks about it, so I'd give him a up to see what he thinks.
Well, let's talk about, first of all, the time of the year. That has a lot to do with where you might want to go.
We're looking at August.
Well, Alaska first pops to my mind.
That sounds nice.
So Alaska is a marvelous trip. personally, now this is a personal prejudice, I would rather be on one of the, quote, smaller ships. And I'm not talking about a rowboat by any matter of fact. But the 3,000 or 4,000 people I prefer to be on a ship for 1,500, 1,800. Okay. That's a personal prejudice, you see. Okay. There's more than enough to do, and you can actually get to know a few people. I mean, you may not even see your wife again on one of those 4,000 passenger trips. They're just so vast. Okay. The inside passage obviously is the way to go. You will see nothing, but what I'm getting at is it's amazing how much nothing there is up there. And the only problem with Alaska, not a problem, but it would be a shame not to have you spend a few extra days in Alaska, touring around Alaska. You've gone that far.
Right.
I'd want to see you get up. Certainly you're going to have to go to Anchorage. There's no way to escape that. I don't mean escape in a bad way. And then I'd want to get up to Fairbanks. But that would be my absolute first choice at that time of the year.
And what would be a good way to start, or do you go through a travel agent, or? Oh
yeah, I would. I can give you a name. The people that run our cruises. You call my office, but I have nothing to do with this. Don't misunderstand me.
I understand.
It's Cruise Works. They're in Los Angeles, and they do a marvelous job. And I certainly would tell you, no matter what you do, go through an agent. Why? Because you're not going to save any money going directly to the cruise line, but if something does go a cropper, and things do from time to time, you got somebody to call that knows who you are. Not an 800 number that tell you, oh, your call is so very important to us, the average wait is 48 minutes,
I understand.
Who needs that? But aside from that, that would be my first choice, would be Alaska. And this is a personal prejudice, which I don't think I can defend. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
But I much prefer to go from Vancouver up than I do from, say, Whittier down. And there's really no rational reason for that I can tell you. But I much prefer going up. Well, for one thing, I like the way that the cities are laid out. Uh-huh. And there's nothing you can do about that. That's the map. And I find it to be a better trip going up. That doesn't mean if you can't get on a ship with the right price and whatever, you shouldn't do it coming down. And I would urge you, if you can find the time and somebody to look after the trolls, to try to get up to Fairbanks as well as Anchorage. Because the likelihood is you aren't going there again. You may. I don't have any way of knowing that.
Yeah, possibly. My place of work we have an office in Fairbanks now. So.
Do you?
Yeah.
Well, maybe you could figure out a way to make that a business trip.
Awesome.
Hello, Uncle Sam. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's what do you do?
I'm an environmental geologist.
Environmental geologist. What does that mean in 15 seconds?
We go around and clean up stuff that's been spoiled by industry and such. Clean up soil and groundwater.
They have a groundwater problem not too far from where I live here, okay? They just announced that they think it's going to take 78 years to clean it up.
Yeah?
Well, you can make that kind of prediction because there's no adults going to be alive that are around right now.
Right. Yep.
So who the hell is going to know if it's 78? Can you imagine that, 78 years?
Yeah, we got some of those working, and we do a couple of things that take a long period of time, but it's faster than just natural attenuation.
Indeed. And, what's I think is difficult to adjudicate is that many of the things that caused the pollution were perfectly legal at the time.
Yes.
And yet they want to penalize the companies that did it. And I have a tough time with that one morally. They didn't do anything wrong according to the laws of their time, and now they're told they got to spend bazillions of dollars to clean up, which was a perfectly legal action.
Right.
Which at some future date we could maybe discuss that one. Well, I do wish you well. That trip to Alaska, I promise you will never regret. And August is the height of the season. I'm Bruce Williams. Well, son of a gun, we have concluded one of our last programs. Tomorrow will be the end of the road, and I would hope that as many of you as possible can share a few minutes of that program. I will read some things that you have requested. Got a few comments to make along the way and whatever. It's been a wonderful 35 years, people, and you made it so. My thanks to Bill and Zach and all of you guys that make this possible. I look forward to chatting with you tomorrow night. See you then. I'm Bruce Williams. God bless America.